There are moments in life when the weight of the world seems unbearable. The challenges, the trials, the endless demands, we often wonder, does anyone really know what I'm going through? But let me remind you today, God knows. He sees every burden, every sleepless night, and every sigh of exhaustion. You may feel alone in your struggle, but God is with you. He knows you are tired. In the midst of life's chaos, when you feel overwhelmed, it's easy to wonder if anyone truly understands the weight you're carrying. You move through your days facing challenge after challenge, trying to keep your head above water. Whether it's financial strain, family conflicts, health issues, or emotional turmoil, the burdens pile up, and at times it feels unbearable. But here's something to hold on to: God sees every single burden. He's not a distant observer, far removed from your struggles. He is intimately aware of every detail of your life. Every tear you've cried in secret, every sleepless night, every moment of frustration, God knows them all. He is not blind to your pain, nor is he indifferent. He knows the load you carry, even when you put on a brave face for the world. Sometimes we feel like we have to appear strong, like we have to bear our burdens alone because no one else understands. But God is not fooled by outward appearances. He looks deeper, straight into the heart. He knows when you are on the verge of collapse, when you are at your breaking point. There are times when life feels like a heavy load, and no matter how hard you try, it doesn't seem to lighten. You carry the weight of responsibilities, expectations, and pressures that sometimes make you feel crushed. Yet, even in those moments when the burden feels insurmountable, God's presence remains constant. He doesn't just see the burden, you must remember that he's also there, right beside you, offering to help carry the load. One of the most powerful truths we often overlook is that God invites us to cast our burdens upon him. He is not asking us to be self-sufficient or to bear everything alone. He calls us to lay down our anxieties, our worries, and our struggles at his feet. The problem is, we often feel that we need to handle it all, that somehow asking for help even from God is a sign of weakness. But the very essence of faith is learning to depend on him, to trust that he not only sees your burden, but that he cares deeply enough to intervene. God's knowledge of your burden is not passive, he is actively involved in your life. Even when you don't feel his presence, he is there, working in ways you cannot yet see. In the quiet moments when you feel like no one understands, he is working behind the scenes, preparing solutions to problems that haven't even surfaced yet. His plan for your life takes into account every hardship, every obstacle, and every challenge. He's not just watching, he's moving, guiding, and preparing a path for you to walk through. Sometimes we may think that because our burdens remain, God must not care or that he is distant. But God's timing is not our timing, and his ways are higher than ours. There are seasons where we may have to carry the weight a little longer than we would like. But it's not because God is absent. He's building something within you during this time: strength, endurance, and faith. The weight you carry is not meant to break you, but to mold you into someone stronger, someone more prepared for the blessings and opportunities ahead. Even when you can't see the purpose behind your burden, trust that God sees it. He knows why you're walking through this season, and he knows when the time is right to lift that burden from your shoulders. He sees the end from the beginning, and he is carefully shaping your path to bring about the best outcome for you. In his infinite wisdom, he knows what you need in this moment, even if it feels overwhelming. So while it may seem like the burden is too much to bear, take heart in the knowledge that God sees it. Not a single detail escapes his attention. He's not ignoring your cries for help, and he's not indifferent to your pain. He is with you, and in his perfect timing, he will provide the relief you need. Until then, rest in the assurance that you are seen, known, and loved by a God who never leaves you to carry your burdens alone. Life often feels like a race against time. We set goals, make plans, and work hard, expecting everything to fall into place according to our schedules. But when things don't happen as quickly as we want, frustration sets in. We begin to question whether we're on the right path or if our efforts are in vain. In these moments of impatience and uncertainty, we must remember the wisdom of trusting in God's timing. It may not align with our own expectations, but it is always perfect. God operates outside of the limitations of human time. He sees the bigger picture, the beginning and the end, and He knows exactly when certain things need to happen in our lives. There is a divine order to everything, and while we may not understand why some doors seem to remain closed or why progress feels slow, God's timing is always purposeful. His delays are not denials, they are moments where He is aligning everything to work out for our good. When you're tired and waiting for a breakthrough, it can feel like you're stuck in a holding pattern. You've prayed, you've worked, and yet things remain the same. In those moments, it's important to recognize that waiting is not a passive activity in God's eyes. Waiting is often a season of preparation. God may be refining your character, deepening your faith, or shaping you in ways that you may not even be aware of. The waiting period is just as valuable as the moment of fulfillment, because it is in the waiting that we learn to trust in Him fully. We live in a world that celebrates instant results, but God is more concerned with our growth than our timelines. While we may be eager for quick solutions or immediate answers, God's timing allows us to develop patience, endurance, and trust. These qualities are essential for handling the blessings and responsibilities that will come when His timing is fulfilled. If we were to receive everything we wanted the moment we asked for it, we might not be ready to handle it. God's timing ensures that we are prepared not just for the blessing itself, but for the responsibilities and challenges that come with it. There's also a peace that comes from resting in God's timing. When we let go of the need to control every detail and trust that God is in charge, we find a sense of calm that can't be shaken by external circumstances. We no longer feel the pressure to force things to happen or to meet arbitrary deadlines. Instead, we can move forward in faith, knowing that at the right time, the doors will open and the path will become clear. It's in these moments of surrender that we experience God's perfect peace, even when the future seems uncertain. God's timing also reminds us that He is never late. What may seem like a delay to us is actually divine orchestration. He knows the exact moment when the pieces of your life will come together, when the opportunity will align with your readiness, and when His purposes will be fulfilled. If you rush ahead of His timing, you may miss the fullness of what He has prepared for you. But if you wait, trusting that He knows what's best, you will see the beauty of His plan unfold in ways you never imagined. So while the waiting season may be difficult and exhausting, it is not wasted. Every moment is part of God's greater plan, and His timing is always worth the wait. Rest in the assurance that He knows exactly what you need and when you need it. In the end, His timing will reveal the greater purpose behind every delay and every unanswered prayer. Pain is one of the most difficult experiences to endure, yet it is a universal part of life. No one is exempt from it, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual. In moments of intense pain, it's natural to ask, why is this happening to me? We struggle to understand why we have to face hardship and why at times it feels so overwhelming. But in the midst of the suffering, we must recognize that there is always a purpose behind the pain. God doesn't waste any experience, and even our most challenging moments serve a greater role in His plan for our lives. Pain often becomes the catalyst for growth and transformation. It pushes us beyond our comfort zones and forces us to confront aspects of ourselves and our lives that we might otherwise avoid. When everything is going smoothly, it's easy to remain stagnant, to settle into routines without thinking too much about change or progress. But when pain enters the picture, it disrupts that sense of ease, compelling us to examine what needs to shift in our lives. It's often in our darkest moments that we experience the most profound personal growth. One of the reasons pain has a purpose is because it refines us. Much like gold is purified in fire, we too are purified through the heat of our trials. Pain strips away the superficial, the unnecessary, and the distractions in life. It brings into focus what truly matters. In these moments, we often find ourselves seeking God more earnestly, relying on Him more deeply, and trusting Him more fully. The pain becomes the fire that burns away our reliance on our own strength and draws us closer to God's power. Additionally, pain equips us with empathy and compassion. It allows us to connect with others who are suffering. When we've walked through difficult seasons ourselves, we can offer comfort and understanding to those going through similar challenges. The pain we experience becomes a tool for ministry as we can share how God brought us through and offer hope to others in their struggles. Without having gone through certain difficulties, we might not be able to relate to or support others in the same way. Pain also teaches us perseverance. Enduring hardship builds resilience and strengthens our faith. It's easy to believe in God's goodness when everything is going well, but when we're faced with pain, that belief is tested. Pain teaches us how to hold on to faith, even when circumstances are tough. It teaches us that God is still present, even in the midst of suffering, and that His promises remain true regardless of how we feel. Perseverance through pain deepens our trust in God's plan and timing, helping us to grow spiritually. Pain has a way of revealing hidden strength. It's in moments of weakness that we often discover the depth of our inner resilience. We may not realize how strong we truly are until we're forced to push through adversity. God uses pain to show us that we are capable of more than we ever imagined, not because of our own abilities, but because of His strength working through us. Every pain we experience is part of God's greater purpose for our lives. Though it may be hard to see in the moment, He uses it to shape us into the person He has called us to be. He allows pain to bring about a greater good that we may not fully understand at the time, but later when we look back, we often realize that the pain we endured was the very thing that led us to a deeper understanding of ourselves, our faith, and our purpose in His plan. In our culture, strength is often equated with power, control, and self-reliance. We are taught to push forward, overcome, and never show signs of weakness. However, in the spiritual realm, the concept of strength takes on a different meaning. God's strength is made perfect in our weakness, and this truth stands in stark contrast to the world's definition of power. It is in our moments of greatest vulnerability, when we feel completely depleted and incapable, that God's power shines the brightest. When we reach the end of our own abilities, we enter into a space where God can work in ways that we never thought possible. Our weakness becomes a doorway to divine intervention. It's in these moments that we recognize our limitations and realize that we cannot do everything on our own. This realization is not a failure, it is a necessary step in surrendering to God's greater plan. Our human strength has limits, but God's strength knows no bounds. He is not limited by our frailties or shortcomings, and in fact, He often uses those very weaknesses to demonstrate His power. The Apostle Paul understood this concept well when he wrote, "When I am weak, then I am strong." This wasn't just a comforting idea, it was a profound spiritual truth that Paul experienced firsthand. He faced tremendous hardships, beatings, imprisonment, and persecution. Yet, through all of it, Paul discovered that his own strength wasn't enough. He needed something greater, and that's when God's power became most evident in his life. When Paul could no longer rely on his own resources, God's supernatural strength carried him through. This spiritual strength that arises through weakness is not about denying our struggles or pretending that everything is fine. It's about acknowledging our frailty and then leaning into God's infinite power. In doing so, we open ourselves up to a strength that transcends the physical and emotional. God doesn't ask us to be invincible. He asks us to trust Him to be our strength when we have none left. This trust allows us to endure the hardships of life with a sense of peace, knowing that God's power is at work within us, even when we feel broken and weary. Another profound aspect of spiritual strength through weakness is that it teaches us humility. When we experience weakness, we are reminded that we are not in control, that we are dependent on God for everything. This humility deepens our faith and allows us to let go of the illusion that we must always have everything together. In our weakness, we learn to trust God more fully, to rely on His wisdom and timing rather than our own understanding. It's a humbling experience, but it's also a freeing one because we no longer have to carry the burden of self-sufficiency. God's strength through our weakness also serves as a testimony to others. When people see us enduring difficult situations, not by our own power, but by the grace and strength of God, it becomes a powerful witness of His presence in our lives. They see that we are not defeated by our circumstances, and they recognize that something greater is sustaining us. Our weaknesses, rather than being a source of shame, become a platform for showcasing God's glory. Through our vulnerability, others are able to see the beauty of God's strength and are drawn closer to Him. So while weakness may seem like a hindrance in the eyes of the world, in God's kingdom, it is an opportunity for Him to reveal His strength in our lives. It is through our weakest moments that we come to know the full measure of His power. Instead of running from weakness or trying to mask it, we can embrace it, knowing that God's strength will always fill the gaps where our own strength fails. When life presents challenges that feel insurmountable, it's easy to fall into despair. Disappointments, setbacks, and unanswered prayers can make even the strongest person question their path. We often find ourselves asking, why me? But where is God in all of this in moments of trial? It may feel like the foundation of our faith is shaken. However, these moments are not an invitation to despair, but a call to trust in God more deeply. In the midst of difficulties, God is calling us not to give in to fear or hopelessness, but to lean on Him fully. Despair is a tool of the enemy, designed to keep us trapped in doubt and darkness. It clouds our vision and makes us feel isolated, as though no one, not even God, can understand or alleviate our pain. But this is far from the truth. The challenges we face are never meant to break us, they are meant to deepen our dependence on God. Rather than being moments of abandonment, our trials are moments of transformation. God does not allow hardship without purpose, and in every season of difficulty, He offers an invitation to trust. Trusting in God doesn't mean ignoring our problems or pretending that everything is fine. It means acknowledging that, even though we may not understand the reasons behind our struggles, we believe in a God who is in control. Trust allows us to step forward in faith, even when the path ahead is unclear. It's an act of surrender, choosing to believe that God is working behind the scenes, orchestrating events in ways that are far beyond our comprehension. While we may see only the immediate problem, God sees the bigger picture. He knows how today's pain will shape tomorrow's blessings. There are countless examples throughout Scripture where people of faith faced overwhelming situations and were tempted to despair, but instead they chose to trust. Take the story of Joseph, for instance, sold into slavery by his own brothers, imprisoned for a crime he didn't commit, and forgotten in a foreign land. Joseph had every reason to lose hope. Yet he trusted in God's promise, and in the end, God elevated him to a position of power and authority, using his trials to save an entire nation. Joseph's life is a testament to the fact that God's plan is always working, even in the most difficult circumstances. Trust also requires patience. Despair comes when we want immediate answers and solutions, but trust asks us to wait on God's timing. His timing is perfect, though it may not align with our own. In moments of waiting, we can grow restless and anxious, but trust teaches us to find peace in the waiting. It's in these moments that God is refining us, preparing us for something greater. The process of waiting, while uncomfortable, is often the place where our faith is strengthened the most. When despair knocks on the door of your heart, remember that God is faithful. He has not forgotten you, and He has not left you to face your challenges alone. His word is filled with promises that He will never leave nor forsake us, that He is close to the brokenhearted, and that He works all things together for the good of those who love Him. Trusting in these promises allows us to rise above despair and face our challenges with hope and confidence. Even in the darkest of times, when it feels like everything is falling apart, God is holding it all together. Trusting Him means believing that His plans are for your good, even when your circumstances suggest otherwise. It means holding on to faith when it feels like there is nothing left to hold on to. And as you trust, you will find that God's strength carries you through, bringing you to a place of victory you couldn't have reached on your own. Life has a way of wearing us down. The pressures of work, relationships, and personal challenges can drain our energy, leaving us feeling exhausted and overwhelmed. In these moments of weariness, we often look for ways to recharge, seeking comfort and renewal through various means, whether it's taking time off, engaging in hobbies, or spending time with loved ones. While these things can offer temporary relief, true renewal, the kind that revives the soul and restores our spirit, comes only from God's Spirit. God's Spirit is the source of life itself. From the very beginning, it was His breath that brought life into humanity. This same Spirit continues to sustain us, offering refreshment and renewal when we feel like we have nothing left to give. When we invite God's Spirit into our lives, we are inviting the very presence of God to breathe new life into our weary hearts. It's more than just a momentary boost. It's a deep spiritual renewal that touches every aspect of who we are. The beauty of God's Spirit is that it knows exactly what we need, even when we can't articulate it ourselves. Often, when we are tired or overwhelmed, we don't even know what will bring us back to a place of peace and strength. But God's Spirit searches the depths of our hearts, knowing our innermost thoughts and desires. He knows the areas of our lives that need healing, the wounds that need mending, and the burdens we are carrying. Through His Spirit, God ministers to us in ways that go far beyond what we can understand or imagine. Renewal from God's Spirit is not just about restoring energy, it's about transformation. As we allow the Spirit to work in us, we are not merely restored to where we were before, but we are renewed in a way that makes us stronger and more resilient. The Spirit has the power to change us from the inside out, reshaping our hearts and minds so that we are better equipped to handle the trials and tribulations of life. This transformation is ongoing as the Spirit continually works within us, helping us to grow in faith, wisdom, and love. One of the most powerful ways the Spirit renews us is through the gift of peace. In a world filled with chaos and uncertainty, God's Spirit brings a peace that surpasses all understanding. It's a peace that remains even when our circumstances are difficult, because it is rooted not in external factors but in the presence of God Himself. This peace calms our anxious hearts, reminding us that we are held by a God who is in control of every aspect of our lives. Another aspect of renewal from God's Spirit is the restoration of joy. Life's hardships can sometimes rob us of our joy, leaving us feeling heavy and burdened. But God's Spirit revives our joy, not by removing the challenges we face, but by giving us a deeper sense of His presence in the midst of them. This joy is not based on fleeting happiness, but on the knowledge that God is with us, guiding us and strengthening us no matter what we are going through. God's Spirit also renews our hope. When life becomes overwhelming, it's easy to lose sight of the promises God has made to us. We may begin to doubt His goodness or question whether we will ever see the fulfillment of His plans for our lives. But the Spirit reminds us of God's faithfulness. He renews our hope by pointing us back to God's promises, assuring us that, even when we can't see it, God is working all things together for our good. In times of weariness and exhaustion, we must remember that true renewal doesn't come from the world around us. It comes from God's Spirit. As we open ourselves to His presence and allow Him to work within us, we will experience a renewal that goes beyond physical rest. It's a renewal that restores our soul, strengthens our spirit, and transforms our lives. In life, we all face moments of exhaustion, where the weight of the world seems too heavy to bear. Yet, it is in these very moments that God calls us to a deeper trust in Him, reminding us that He sees every burden, every tear, and every moment of pain. Our weariness is not a sign of failure, but an opportunity for God's strength to be made perfect in our weakness. Through trials, we are refined, transformed, and ultimately drawn closer to His purpose for our lives. As we surrender our struggles to Him, we find renewal, peace, and strength in His Spirit. God knows our weariness, but He also knows the perfect plan He has for us, one that leads to hope, restoration, and victory through him.